On a crisp morning in the heart of a bustling city, Ava Williams, black, brilliant, and wealthy, was looking forward to what promised to be a rare escape from the demands of her fast-paced life. As one of the youngest black billionaires in the world, she was accustomed to the constant whirl of business meetings, press appearances, and high-stakes negotiations. Yet, today was different. Today, she had decided to step away from the pressures, to unwind in peace at the luxurious Regal Heights Hotel, one of the city's most exclusive spots. This was supposed to be her retreat, away from the world of boardrooms and media storms. Ava arrived at the hotel, the sleek glass structure rising in front of her like a beacon of elegance. The red carpet at the entrance, the meticulously designed lobby, and the plush, sparkling chandeliers, all were meant to convey an aura of exclusivity, of sophistication. Ava was no stranger to luxury. She had built her empire from the ground up, clawing her way to the top despite the numerous obstacles that came with being a black woman in an overwhelmingly white corporate world. This hotel was a symbol of success for her, just like her multi-million-dollar company and the sprawling penthouse she called home. As she approached the check-in desk, her heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floors. She was greeted with a smile, though the receptionist's eyes quickly flickered from Ava's face to the computer screen, then back to her with a forced politeness. Ava felt the faintest shift in the air, an undercurrent of discomfort. It was the kind of feeling she had learned to recognize after years of navigating spaces where she was often the only person of color. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I assist you today?" The receptionist's voice was practiced, too smooth for comfort. "I have a reservation," Ava replied, handing over her ID and booking confirmation, her tone calm but assertive. The receptionist glanced at the information, then hesitated. "I'm sorry, Ms. Williams, but it looks like there's been a bit of an issue with your reservation. There seems to be a mistake." Ava's brow furrowed. "A mistake? I booked this room weeks ago, and my assistant confirmed the details this morning." I'm sorry, ma'am. It seems that there has been an overbooking issue. We no longer have a room available for you," the receptionist said, her words quick, almost too quick. The smile on her face remained, but it was strained. Ava's pulse quickened, though she kept her expression neutral. "There's no room available? Are you sure about that? I have a confirmation email right here." She pulled out her phone and showed the clerk the reservation. The receptionist shifted uncomfortably, glancing at her manager, who had just entered the lobby. He was a tall, thin man with a meticulously styled goatee, wearing a suit that screamed, "I'm important," but lacked the warmth to match. His eyes locked onto Ava for a fraction of a second, before he gave a curt nod to the receptionist. "Let me take a look at that, ma'am." He approached, his air of authority making the room feel smaller. The receptionist stepped aside as the manager took the phone from Ava's hand, scanning the screen. "I see," he said, his voice slightly dismissive, though he tried to maintain professionalism. "Unfortunately, we are indeed experiencing an overbooking issue, and your reservation has been lost in the system. We can offer you a room at one of our sister hotels down the street, if that works for you." Ava's jaw clenched, but she didn't speak immediately. She was calculating, trying to piece together what was happening. She had stayed at the Regal Heights countless times, always receiving top-tier service. But this felt different. She felt the unmistakable sting of what she knew, deep down, was likely discrimination. She had been denied a room before, but never in such a blatant manner, never in a place she thought was beyond such bias. "No," Ava said, her voice cool but edged with frustration. "I have no interest in being relocated to another hotel. I'm here for this specific one. You've made a mistake, and I expect you to correct it." The manager's eyes flickered uncomfortably, but he held his ground. "I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do right now. It's beyond my control." Ava took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could feel the eyes of the other guests in the lobby. On her, and she hated that. She hated feeling as though her every move was under scrutiny, as if her very presence was causing discomfort. But this time, it wasn't just about her. It was about standing up for herself. It was about refusing to be pushed aside by a system that had always tried to make her feel less than. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice softening for just a moment, but with an underlying steel. "You're telling me that despite everything I've done, despite all the contributions I've made, I'm going to be treated like this? That I'm going to be told to leave, with nowhere to go?" The manager's face twitched, and for a brief moment, he looked unsure. But then he quickly regained his composure, his lips pressed into a tight line. "I'm afraid that's all I can offer. Again, I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience." Ava could feel the anger rising, bubbling beneath the surface. She had worked too hard, fought too many battles, to let this slide. She had known discrimination her entire life, but this was something different. This was an institution, a place that prided itself on exclusivity, yet it was now showing its true colors, treating her as if she were somehow less worthy. Without warning, Ava's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and a quick wave of calm washed over her. It was a message from her lawyer, Jordan, confirming that everything was set for an important meeting the following week. It was the perfect reminder, Ava had a lot more power in this world than most people realized. She could, and would, take this higher. "I'll be contacting corporate about this," Ava said, her voice steady now, each word deliberate. "I expect this matter to be resolved immediately." The manager hesitated, but Ava had already turned away, heading toward the elevators. She didn't need to hear any more excuses or hollow apologies. She had dealt with this kind of treatment before, but this time, she wasn't going to let it slide. She wasn't going to let them make her feel small. She would use her voice, her influence, and her resources to ensure that this wasn't just some incident that would fade away. No, this would be the beginning of something much bigger. As she stepped into the elevator, she took a deep breath. The weight of what was happening began to settle in. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all those who had been subjected to the same kind of treatment, those who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. This wasn't just about a room in a hotel, this was about setting a precedent, about standing tall in the face of injustice. Ava's mind was already racing, plotting her next move. The battle had only just begun. Ava left the lobby with a sense of quiet determination, her heels clicking steadily on the marble floor. The day had begun with the promise of respite, a small luxury she had earned after years of tireless work, but now it had morphed into something far more personal. Her anger simmered beneath her composed exterior as she stepped out onto the city streets, the bustling crowds unaware of the battle that was already unfolding behind her calm demeanor. She had been denied entry to a place that promised exclusivity, but in truth, it had only revealed the cracks in its polished facade. She pulled out her phone and dialed Jordan, her lawyer, whose number she had memorized through years of navigating complicated legal landscapes. He picked up after the first ring, his voice a reassuring balm in the midst of rising tension. "Ava? What's going on? You sound different." "I need your help, Jordan," Ava said, her tone firm but controlled. "The Regal Heights just tried to deny me a room. They told me there was no availability, despite my confirmed reservation." The manager was dismissive, and frankly, "I'm done playing nice." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low whistle. "That's unbelievable. But not surprising, unfortunately. You know the kind of people they cater to, Ava." "Yeah," she said with a sigh. "I thought I'd be treated differently, but I guess some places can't hide their true colors for long. I want this fixed. I want to take them down." Jordan's voice turned more serious. "I'll get the paperwork ready, but you need to think this through. Going public could make waves, but it could also backfire. You've got a reputation to protect, and this could get messy." Ava's grip tightened on her phone as she weighed his words. The temptation to fight back, to make her point heard in the loudest way possible, gnawed at her. She was a black woman who had worked her entire life to prove her worth, to fight for the opportunities that were so often denied to others like her. But she also knew the risks. Taking this battle public would expose her to scrutiny, criticism, and perhaps even backlash from the very institutions she had worked so hard to join. "I don't care about the backlash," Ava said, her voice steady now, like a woman who had finally made a decision she could stand by. "This is bigger than me, Jordan. I'm not just fighting for myself, I'm fighting for everyone who's ever been dismissed, overlooked, or told they weren't good enough. The world needs to see what's really going on behind those shiny doors." Jordan sighed. "I'll set things in motion. But you need to be prepared. This will be more than just a legal battle. It'll be a fight for perception, for the way people see you. And that's no small task." "I'm ready for it," Ava said, her mind already racing with the possibilities. She hung up the phone and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision. She had done a lot in her life, built an empire, fought off competitors, proved herself time and again, but this moment felt different. This wasn't just about business. This wasn't just about money. This was about making a statement, about standing up against a system that had long been broken. Ava knew the path she was about to walk would not be easy. But she also knew that she had come too far to back down. Her wealth, her success, none of that mattered if she couldn't stand up for what was right. She couldn't let the arrogance of a hotel chain or the biases of its staff undermine everything she had worked for. That night, she sat in her penthouse, reviewing documents with Jordan and strategizing. The media would need to be involved. Ava had long known that the right message, spread through the right channels, could shift public opinion in her favor. The story of a black billionaire being denied a room at a luxury hotel was one that would grab attention, and Ava planned to use that attention to her advantage. But as they discussed the specifics, a nagging thought kept creeping into Ava's mind. What was it about this situation that felt so familiar? The dismissal, the quick judgment, the cold politeness masking underlying contempt, it all seemed eerily similar to the countless times she had been underestimated throughout her life. From the early days when she'd entered boardrooms dominated by white men, to the more recent high-profile meetings where she had been forced to prove herself over and over again, this moment felt like a microcosm of her entire journey. Ava thought back to the first time she'd walked into a corporate meeting room, fresh out of college, eager and ready to take on the world. She had been the only woman, the only person of color in the room, and she had felt it. She had felt the glances, the hushed conversations, the subtle exclusion. She had learned quickly that in business, it wasn't enough to be good, you had to be better than everyone else. You had to prove your worth at every turn, fight for every inch of space, and sometimes, you had to do it with a smile on your face. Now, here she was, still fighting. Still proving herself. And it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about changing the system, about showing others that they didn't have to settle for being invisible. She wanted to be the catalyst for change, the spark that would set fire to the status quo. The next day, Ava went back to the Regal Heights. This time, she wasn't just a guest. She was a woman on a mission. When she entered the lobby, the receptionist and the manager were both visibly startled. The receptionist stood up quickly, as if she hadn't expected to see Ava again. I'm so sorry, Ms. Williams. We're doing everything we can to resolve the situation," she stammered. The manager, still tight-lipped, didn't offer any apology. Instead, he simply nodded, his eyes flicking nervously between Ava and the front desk. Ava stood tall, her presence commanding attention. "I want to speak to your corporate office," she said, her voice low but firm. "I want to speak to the people who make the decisions here." The manager hesitated for a moment, clearly weighing his options. "I understand, but—" "I don't care what you understand," Ava interjected. "I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. I'm here to make sure the world knows exactly what you did." The tension in the room was palpable, thick with the unspoken weight of what was to come. Ava didn't back down, didn't falter. She had seen this before, the fear in their eyes, the uncomfortable shuffling, the realization that the game they were playing was about to change. As she left the hotel that day, her phone buzzing with messages from Jordan and a few trusted media contacts, Ava felt a sense of finality. This was no longer just about getting a room at a hotel. This was about exposing the uncomfortable truths lurking behind polished facades. She had made her move, and now, there was no turning back. The storm was coming, and Ava was ready to face it head-on. The following days felt like a blur for Ava. She could sense the growing anticipation in the air as the media began to catch wind of her actions. What had started as a seemingly small incident, being denied a room at a luxury hotel, was rapidly morphing into something far larger than she had anticipated. News outlets were calling, social media was ablaze, and suddenly, everyone wanted to know more. They wanted to know why a billionaire had been turned away from a hotel, why she had chosen to fight back, and most importantly, what her next move would be. Ava spent hours each day in meetings with her legal team, reviewing contracts, drafting statements, and figuring out how to wield the growing media frenzy to her advantage. She had known from the start that this battle was about more than just her, it was about the larger narrative. Her story had the potential to shine a light on the ingrained biases within the world of luxury and privilege, to expose the quiet discrimination that often lurked behind the polished exterior of high-end establishments. Her legal team, though experienced, had never seen anything quite like this before. They were used to handling high-profile cases, but this one had taken on a life of its own. Ava's name was trending on every platform. She was no longer just a successful entrepreneur, she was the face of resistance against an unjust system. And the world was watching, waiting to see how she would play her hand. Ava had always been strategic, but this felt different. She knew that what she was about to do could change the course of her life, and the lives of others, forever. The decision she had made to confront the regal heights was no longer just about holding them accountable. It was about taking control of her narrative and using her platform to start a larger conversation about race, privilege, and inequality in spaces that were supposed to be open to all. At first, she had been reluctant to go public, fearing the backlash that might come with challenging such a powerful institution. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that her silence would only perpetuate the status quo. If she wanted to see real change, if she wanted to make a lasting impact, she had to use her influence to break down the walls that had been built around her. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for the countless others who had been pushed aside, overlooked, and silenced. The media coverage was relentless, but it was also a double-edged sword. As the world clamored for more details, Ava began to feel the pressure mounting. The regal heights was not going to go down quietly. She knew they would fight back, after all, they had the resources, the power, and the connections. But Ava had something they didn't, the truth. And she wasn't afraid to use it. Her next move came with a calculated grace. Instead of responding to every media request or issuing vague statements, she took a more direct approach. She called a press conference. It would be an open forum for her to speak directly to the public, to share her side of the story in her own words. No filters, no spin, just the truth. It was bold, and it was risky, but Ava knew that if she was going to make an impact, she had to take control of the narrative. The press conference was held in one of the sleek, modern conference rooms in her corporate office building. The room was packed with journalists, cameras, and reporters, all waiting for Ava to step onto the stage and address the controversy head-on. As she walked to the podium, the room fell silent, every eye trained on her as she took her place at the front. Ava was dressed in a simple but elegant suit, her posture straight and confident. She exuded power, but there was a calmness to her demeanor that belied the storm brewing inside her. This was her moment. She began speaking, her voice steady and clear, as she recounted the events of the previous week. I walked into the Regal Heights expecting to be treated like any other guest. After all, I had made a reservation and paid in full. But instead, I was denied a room. I was told there was no availability, despite having a confirmed booking. And when I asked for an explanation, I was met with nothing but empty promises and condescension. She paused, letting her words sink in. This wasn't just about me. This was about every single person who has ever been turned away, who has ever been dismissed, or ignored. This was about standing up to the system that tells us we don't belong in certain spaces. I'm here today to say that I will no longer tolerate being treated like I don't matter. I will no longer stand idly by while others are made to feel inferior. Her words resonated in the room, and for a moment, the noise of the world seemed to fade away. Ava's gaze swept over the crowd, making eye contact with several reporters, each one watching her with rapt attention. She wasn't just telling her story, she was demanding change. This hotel is just one example of a much larger issue that we face as a society. Discrimination is not just about race, it's about class, it's about privilege, and it's about power. It's about who gets to decide who belongs and who doesn't. And let me tell you this, I will not be silenced. I will not be erased. And neither will anyone else who has been made to feel less than. Ava's words struck a chord with those in the room. There was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The reporters, many of whom had initially been skeptical about her motives, were now listening intently. Ava was no longer just a billionaire businesswoman, she was a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. She had made her stand, and now the world was taking notice. But even as she spoke, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. This wasn't just about one hotel, it was about the larger systems that had allowed these kinds of incidents to continue unchecked. As she finished her statement, Ava knew that the battle was far from over. She had taken the first step, but the road ahead was uncertain. The media coverage exploded in the following days. News outlets from across the globe picked up the story, and Ava's press conference became the centerpiece of every discussion about race and privilege in high society. Public opinion was divided, some lauded her for speaking out, while others criticized her for making a scene. But Ava wasn't concerned with the critics. She had done what needed to be done, and the conversation had been started. Behind the scenes, Ava's legal team was working tirelessly, collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, and preparing for what would undoubtedly be a long and hard-fought battle. But Ava wasn't afraid. She had fought for everything she had in life, and this was no different. This was a fight she was willing to win, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been excluded, overlooked, or dismissed. As she prepared for the next phase of the battle, Ava knew that the fight ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges, setbacks, and moments when she would feel like giving up. But she was ready. Because Ava Williams wasn't just a billionaire, she was a force to be reckoned with, and nothing would stop her from fighting for what was right. The legal battle that followed the press conference was relentless. Ava's team worked tirelessly, poring over contracts, hotel policies, and any scrap of evidence that could be used to build their case. The Regal Heights Resort, once a symbol of luxury, had become the target of Ava's legal and media crusade. The luxury chain had initially tried to brush the whole incident under the rug, assuming that it would all blow over. But Ava had made it clear, this was not something that could be ignored. The hotel's response was swift but defensive. They issued a statement claiming that the denial of her room was merely a misunderstanding, a result of a clerical error. They apologized for any inconvenience, but insisted that there was no underlying motive tied to her race or status. They made it clear that they did not see the incident as a serious matter, hoping to quell the growing public uproar. But Ava wasn't buying it. She knew there was more to the story than a mere mistake. Behind closed doors, her team began to uncover more unsettling facts. They learned that the Regal Heights had a history of turning away high-profile black guests, with no real accountability or transparency. This was not an isolated incident, it was a pattern. The revelation sent shockwaves through Ava's legal team, but it also solidified their determination to fight back. They had the evidence, and they weren't going to let it go unnoticed. The media frenzy around the incident showed no signs of slowing down. Ava's story was being discussed on talk shows, news outlets, and social media platforms. As her name spread across the globe, she found herself at the center of a national conversation about race, class, and privilege. Her story became more than just about a room being denied, it became a symbol of resistance against a system that had long overlooked the rights of marginalized people. But it wasn't all positive attention. The backlash from the hotel industry and even some members of the public was swift and harsh. Many felt that Ava was making too much of a minor inconvenience. They dismissed her as an entitled billionaire who had nothing better to do than create drama over something trivial. Some even accused her of trying to destroy a small business for the sake of her own personal gain. Ava knew that this kind of criticism would come, but it still stung. It was clear that the public's perception of her was as much about who she was as it was about what she represented. To some, she was just another wealthy person using her power to attack those beneath her. But to others, she was a beacon of hope, a woman with the courage to stand up against the injustices that had been perpetuated for far too long. In the midst of the media firestorm, Ava spent most of her time meeting with her legal team and strategizing her next move. She was determined to hold the Regal Heights accountable, but she also knew that this battle could stretch on for months, maybe even years. And she had other responsibilities to manage, her business ventures, her charitable work, and her personal life, all of which had been placed on hold in the wake of this scandal. But it wasn't just about business. Ava had a personal stake in this fight. She had been discriminated against throughout her life, from the moment she entered the world of high finance to the time she had been denied access to the kinds of spaces that were supposedly open to everyone. It had been the subtle slights, the microaggressions, the assumptions made about her because of her race and wealth that had chipped away at her sense of belonging. And now, she was done being silent. As the legal case progressed, Ava found herself facing more obstacles. The hotel had deep pockets, and their lawyers were among the best in the industry. They began to question the validity of Ava's claims, casting doubt on her intentions and motivations. They tried to portray her as a vindictive woman with too much time and money on her hands. But Ava was unfazed. She had known that this would be part of the battle. She had dealt with people questioning her worth and her decisions all her life. She had fought tooth and nail to get to where she was, and she wasn't about to back down now. The pressure mounted as the trial date loomed closer. Ava's every move was scrutinized, her every word dissected by the media. But as much as the public focused on her, she couldn't help but think of those whose voices had been silenced for far longer than hers. Ava had the power to fight back, to demand answers, but what about those who didn't have the resources or platform to be heard? That's what kept her going, even when the weight of it all felt unbearable. Meanwhile, the hotel chain, which had once thought they could weather the storm, was beginning to crumble under the pressure. The scandal was taking a toll on their reputation. Reservations were being cancelled, loyal customers were speaking out in Ava's defense, and even employees were starting to question their company's practices. The Regal Heights had been known for catering to the elite, but now their image was being tarnished by the revelation that they had allowed discrimination to go unchecked for years. The public backlash began to grow stronger. Celebrities, activists, and other high-profile figures began to weigh in, demanding that the Regal Heights be held accountable for their actions. Some boycotted the hotel, while others made public statements in support of Ava. Her story had ignited something deeper, a movement. It wasn't just about one hotel or one billionaire, it was about the Larger issue of inequality in spaces where people were supposed to feel safe and welcome. Ava had given a voice to those who had been marginalized, and now, more than ever, people were rallying behind her. As the legal case entered its most critical phase, Ava's resolve was tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. She was exhausted, physically and mentally drained by the constant media attention and the never-ending fight. But she refused to back down. She knew that this battle was bigger than herself. This was about changing the way the world viewed power, privilege, and discrimination. This was about creating a space where everyone, regardless of race or background, could feel like they belonged. The final twist came when a whistleblower from inside the Regal Heights came forward. An employee, who had worked at the hotel for years, revealed that there had been a covert policy to deny rooms to certain high-profile black guests. They had a secret list, a list of people they deemed undesirable. It was shocking, but not entirely unexpected. The truth was coming to light, and there was no way for the hotel to escape the consequences of their actions. With this new evidence, Ava's legal team was able to push the case to a dramatic conclusion. The Regal Heights was forced to settle. They issued a public apology, agreed to pay a significant settlement, and pledged to overhaul their policies to ensure that all guests, regardless of race, would be treated with dignity and respect. The settlement was a huge victory for Ava, but it wasn't just about the money. It was about the message it sent. Ava had won. But more importantly, she had started a conversation that would continue for years to come. The Regal Heights may have thought they could silence her, but they had underestimated her. Ava Williams wasn't just a billionaire. She was a force of nature, a woman who refused to be silenced, and who fought for what was right, no matter the cost. The story of her battle had changed the world, and Ava knew that this was only the beginning. As the legal victory settled into the past, Ava couldn't shake the overwhelming weight of what she had just achieved. The Regal Heights scandal had begun as a personal affront, an incident that threatened her pride and exposed the ugly underbelly of a hotel chain that had long operated with impunity. But it had grown into something much larger. It had become a battle for justice, a call to action for the many who felt that their voices had been suppressed, their experiences minimized. It wasn't just about a single incident of racism, it was a statement, a ripple that had spread far beyond her own personal outrage. In the months following the resolution, Ava's life took a new turn. She became a leader of sorts, not just in her own business world, but in the larger conversation about discrimination and inequality. Her platform grew exponentially. Corporate leaders, activists, and policymakers sought her advice. People sent her letters, emails, and messages of gratitude, telling her how her actions had given them hope, how they had been inspired to speak up about their own experiences of injustice. But Ava never saw herself as a hero. She was simply doing what she believed was right, what anyone in her position should do. Yet, the weight of the newfound influence was undeniable. She received invitations to speak at major conferences, panel discussions, and television shows. And while she appreciated the recognition, the attention often felt overwhelming. Every move she made was now under a microscope. Every word, every decision, was analyzed and critiqued. With all of this new influence came an increased responsibility. Ava had never shied away from hard work or high expectations, but she also understood that this platform wasn't just about her. She didn't want her victory to be a flash in the pan, a momentary win that quickly faded into history. No, she wanted to build something that would endure, something that would spark lasting change. She poured herself into her foundation, using her wealth and influence to fund initiatives aimed at empowering marginalized communities. She established scholarships for young people of color, funded leadership programs for women, and worked with other organizations to provide resources for those facing systemic discrimination. She partnered with businesses, pushing them to adopt inclusive practices and hold themselves accountable for any biases they may perpetuate. But Ava didn't stop there. She knew that real change wasn't just about financial support, it was about education, about shifting mindsets and challenging long-held stereotypes. She began working with universities and schools, helping to create curriculums that focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. She spoke to students about her journey, about the hurdles she had faced as a Black woman in the corporate world, and how those challenges had only made her stronger. She wanted the next generation to understand that their voices mattered, that they had the power to create change. However, not everyone was happy with Ava's new role as a public figure. There were those who saw her as a threat to the status quo. Some people from the business world, particularly those who had benefited from the existing power structures, were uncomfortable with her outspoken advocacy for equality. They tried to discredit her, to undermine her efforts. They spread rumors that she was too focused on her own agenda, too determined to make waves in industries that didn't want to change. But Ava remained resolute. She had faced adversity her entire life, and this was no different. The resistance she encountered only fueled her determination. She realized that there would always be people who would try to tear down those who dared to challenge the system. But she also recognized that the more she fought, the more people would stand beside her. Ava had become a symbol of perseverance and resilience. Her story wasn't just her own, it was the story of countless others who had faced discrimination and bias but had been too afraid to speak up. In her personal life, the changes were more subtle. Ava had never been one to indulge in luxury or let the trappings of wealth define her. But now, with her public profile growing, her life was filled with constant media attention and societal pressure. She found herself pulled between her desire for privacy and her new role as an activist and leader. Her relationships with friends and family became more complicated. Some people were thrilled by her success, others felt distant, unsure of how to relate to the new version of Ava. She found herself questioning how much of her identity was tied to her wealth and position, and how much of it was truly her own. It was in these moments of solitude, when the spotlight wasn't on her, that Ava wrestled with the deeper questions. Was she truly making a difference? Was she the right person to lead this movement? Could she, with all her resources, really change the world in a meaningful way? The weight of those questions was often paralyzing, but Ava knew that if she let them overwhelm her, she would lose sight of the larger mission she had set out to accomplish. Ava's journey had been marked by one unexpected twist after another. The hotel incident, which had started as a personal grievance, had thrust her into a broader fight for justice. It had forced her to reconsider her role in society and the power she held to influence change. And as her platform grew, so did the challenges she faced. But she was undeterred. She knew that it was not the struggle that defined her, but the way she responded to it. The world had a long way to go in terms of equality, and Ava was fully aware that she couldn't fix everything overnight. But she was determined to keep pushing, to keep advocating for the change she knew was possible. Each time she saw the impact of her work, whether it was a young student receiving a scholarship or a corporate leader pledging to adopt more inclusive practices, she was reminded of why she had started this journey in the first place. One evening, as Ava sat in her office, reviewing the latest proposals for her foundation, her phone buzzed with a new message. It was a video clip of a young girl at a community event, speaking about the way Ava's story had inspired her to become an activist. The girl, no older than 14, spoke about how she had faced discrimination at school and had felt helpless, until she had heard Ava's story. Ava made me believe that I could fight back, the girl said, that I didn't have to stay quiet, that my voice mattered. Ava's eyes welled with tears as she watched the video. In that moment, she knew that all the sacrifices, all the challenges, had been worth it. The ripple effect of her actions was already beginning to create change, and she realized that this was just the beginning. Her victory against the Regal Heights was no longer just about a hotel. It had become a symbol of something far greater, a movement that had the potential to dismantle the barriers that had held marginalized communities back for centuries. Ava had become a catalyst for that change, and she was just getting started. She knew that her fight wasn't over. There would always be more work to do, more battles to fight. But she was ready for whatever came next. As the years went on, Ava's influence continued to grow, but her sense of purpose remained unwavering. The victories weren't always easy to come by, but every step forward felt like another victory for the people who had been denied a voice for so long. Ava was no longer just a black billionaire, she was a force for justice, an unstoppable voice for change. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would always stand firm in her commitment to creating a better, more inclusive world for all. Years had passed since Ava's infamous confrontation at the Regal Heights Hotel, and while much had changed, one thing remained constant: her unwavering drive to challenge the systems that upheld inequality. Her foundation was thriving, her influence had expanded, and her personal brand was synonymous with courage and social justice. But as her reach grew, so did the complexity of her life. Ava had started to notice cracks in her seemingly impenetrable armor, the weight of constant expectation, the pressure to always be the voice of reason, and the growing isolation that came with being a trailblazer. What no one knew about Ava's rise to prominence was that behind the glossy exterior of her success, she was often overwhelmed. The public face of social change was often solitary, riddled with late nights spent reviewing policy proposals, attending high-profile events, and fielding an endless stream of media requests. She found solace in the quiet moments, when she could retreat from the spotlight and reconnect with herself. But even those moments became fewer and farther between as her commitments grew. She began to feel as though her life was no longer hers. Despite this, Ava had always been a fighter. She had fought to overcome discrimination, to climb the corporate ladder, and to transform her own identity from a woman with a grievance into a beacon of empowerment for others. Her success was not just about breaking barriers for herself but about creating pathways for others to follow. She could have easily rested on her laurels, enjoyed the luxuries her wealth afforded, and let the world carry on as it was. But that was never her way. Ava knew that the fight wasn't just about her. It was about the many people still silenced by society's prejudices, people who hadn't yet found their voice or their platform. She had become a powerful example of what could be achieved when someone stood firm in the face of adversity, but she also knew that her journey was far from complete. There were still too many people who, like her, had been denied their rightful place in society. Then came the invitation. An anonymous donor, whose name Ava didn't recognize, had offered her the largest sum of money her foundation had ever seen. The catch was that the donation came with strings attached. The donor wanted Ava to head up a new initiative, one that would tackle systemic inequalities across the globe. This wasn't just about one community or one industry, it was about overhauling entire systems that perpetuated inequality. And the stakes couldn't have been higher. Ava had always been driven by the idea of transformative change, but this offer was different. The power she'd gain from this new role would be enormous, but it would also come with unimaginable challenges. As she debated whether to accept the offer, Ava knew that the decision wasn't just about her foundation's future, it was about the future of the movement itself. Her involvement would give the initiative visibility and legitimacy, but it would also make her the target of those who wanted to maintain the status quo. The donors behind the initiative weren't interested in half-hearted attempts at change. They wanted real disruption. They wanted the system to be torn down and rebuilt from the ground up. With no easy answers, Ava confided in her closest allies. Her mentor, Henry, a man who had seen the transformation of the corporate world over the years, warned her of the dangers that came with so much power. "Ava, there's no doubt that your heart is in the right place," he said. "But the bigger the platform, the greater the risk. You have to be ready for the firestorm that will follow. If you take this on, you'll be under constant attack, not just from those who disagree with your methods, but from those who are invested in keeping things just the way they are." At the same time, Ava knew that there was a price to be paid for standing still. The fight for equality couldn't be won by staying on the sidelines, and she had already seen firsthand the way the system punished inaction. She couldn't allow the voices of the oppressed to go unheard simply because it was easier to avoid conflict. In the end, Ava made her choice. She would accept the challenge, but on her own terms. She would not be swayed by the expectations of others or by the pressures of those who sought to control the narrative. She would be unapologetic in her pursuit of justice. As the announcement was made, the media frenzy was instantaneous. Headlines screamed of Ava's bold move, of her refusal to back down and her commitment to tackling inequality head-on. Critics lined up to call her naive, to accuse her of overreaching, to claim that no one person could ever make the kind of change she was promising. But Ava remained undeterred. She had faced far greater challenges than this, and she knew that the true test of her resolve was yet to come. The months that followed were grueling. Ava worked tirelessly to assemble a team of experts, activists, and policymakers who shared her vision for a just society. They began drafting proposals for sweeping changes in every sector, from education to healthcare to criminal justice. She spent days meeting with world leaders, strategizing with her team, and attending rallies where people poured their hearts out, telling stories of discrimination, poverty, and hopelessness. Ava felt their pain, their frustration, and their longing for a world that could finally live up to the promise of equality. But the backlash was relentless. Political opponents launched smear campaigns, accusing her of attempting to dismantle capitalism, of disrupting the very fabric of society. There were whispers behind closed doors, corporate leaders who warned their employees not to support Ava's initiative, fearful of the repercussions. But Ava refused to back down. She had been underestimated before, and each time, she had come out stronger. Yet, as the project gained traction, Ava started to realize just how deep the resistance ran. It wasn't just about the individuals or the companies that profited from inequality, it was the system itself that was fighting back. Ava was not just fighting against individuals, but against centuries of entrenched power, wealth, and privilege. She knew that the fight she had taken on was bigger than any she had faced before, and there were days when she wondered if she could truly succeed. In those moments, Ava drew strength from the people she had met along the way, the young activists, the victims of discrimination, the leaders who had come to her for advice. Their courage and resilience fueled her own. She knew that the path ahead would be long and difficult, but it was one she had to walk. One day, as Ava walked through the headquarters of her initiative, she was struck by a thought: change didn't happen overnight. It happened through the collective effort of those who refused to accept things as they were. Ava had started this journey as one woman in a hotel room, and now, she was leading an international movement. Her decision had been a gamble, a leap into the unknown. But as she looked around at the progress that had already been made, at the lives that were beginning to change, she realized that the fight had never truly been about her. It had always been about the people she represented, the voices that had been silenced for too long. And as the initiative began to pick up momentum, Ava knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be difficult, but it was a road she was willing to walk, knowing that each step would bring her closer to the world she had always dreamed of, one where everyone had the same opportunities, the same freedoms, and the same rights. She had fought the fight that mattered, and now, she was building the future that would change everything.